I am Amelia, 32 years old, and I never imagined a Christmas dinner could change everything. The warmth of the fireplace contrasted sharply with the cold stares I received as I walked through my childhood home. After 5 years away, I returned with hope and expensive gifts, expecting a loving reunion. Instead, I walked into the ultimate betrayal that awakened something inside me. Before I tell you how my family forgot me on Christmas, drop a comment with where you're watching from and subscribe for more stories about finding your worth. My relationship with my family had been complicated from the beginning. Growing up in suburban Boston, I was the youngest of 3 children and the only daughter. My parents, Margaret and Richard, always placed incredibly high expectations on all of us, yet their expectations for me somehow always felt impossible to meet. While their affection was consistently scarce, my 2 older brothers, Noah and Ethan, were the golden children. Noah, the eldest, followed in our father's footsteps into law, while Ethan became a successful architect. In our parents' eyes, they could do no wrong. Every achievement they made was celebrated with dinner parties and expensive gifts. When Noah got into Harvard Law, my parents threw a lavish party, inviting nearly everyone in our social circle. When Ethan won his first design competition, they framed the newspaper article and hung it prominently in our living room. My childhood was different. I was constantly compared to my brothers or to my mother's friends' daughters. Why can't you be more like Noah? He never got anything less than an A. Or, look at Caroline Thompson. She plays 3 instruments and still manages to be class president. No matter what I achieved, it was never enough. I still remember when I was 16 and won first place in a national science competition. I rushed home, trophy in hand, bursting with excitement to share my news. When I walked through the door, my parents were in the living room discussing Ethan's new job offer. "Mom, Dad, guess what?" I interrupted, unable to contain my excitement. My mother glanced at me briefly. "Not now, Amelia. We're discussing something important." "But I won the national science competition. First place," I said, holding up my trophy. "That's nice, honey," my father replied distractedly. "Did you hear which firm offered Ethan a position?" That was the moment something inside me broke. I realized that in their eyes, my achievements would always be secondary. That night, I promised myself that one day they would have no choice but to acknowledge me. Throughout high school, I threw myself into my studies, especially computer science and business. I was determined to build something they couldn't ignore. When college acceptance letters arrived, I earned a full scholarship to MIT. But even that achievement was overshadowed by Noah's engagement announcement that same weekend. At my graduation from MIT, my family attended but left early because my father had an important golf game. No celebration dinner, not even a proper congratulations. Just a quick, good job from my mother before they hurried away. That was the day I chose to distance myself. I moved to San Francisco, declined their half-hearted holiday invitations, and limited our communication to occasional phone calls. I needed space to build my life without their constant judgment. For 5 years, I worked relentlessly, starting as a software engineer at a tech company before launching my own startup. Those years were tough. I lived in a tiny apartment, worked 18-hour days, and poured everything I had into my business. All the while, my family remained largely unaware of my struggles or successes. My mother would call occasionally, but our conversations were superficial, filled with updates about Noah's perfect children or Ethan's latest design project, never truly asking about my life. When my company began to gain traction, securing major clients and attracting investor interest, I didn't share the news with them. Why bother? They had never cared before. Then, last month, something unexpected happened. My mother called, her voice unusually warm, and invited me home for Christmas. "The whole family will be here. We miss you, Amelia. It's time to come home." She mentioned that things had changed, that they'd reflected on our relationship and wanted to make amends. Against my better judgment, hope flickered inside me. Maybe they had finally recognized their behavior. Maybe they were ready to truly see me. With that fragile hope, I accepted the invitation, deciding to give them one last chance. Once I decided to return home for Christmas, I wanted to make it special. Despite our strained relationship, I wanted to show my family that I had become successful and generous. I spent weeks selecting the perfect gifts for each family member, gifts that showed I still paid attention to their interests despite the distance between us. For my mother, I chose a platinum and diamond bracelet from Tiffany's, similar to one she had pointed out in a magazine when I was a teenager. She had sighed then, saying, "Your father would never spend that kind of money on jewelry." Now I could give her that dream gift myself. I spent $3,000 on it, not including the custom engraving. For my father, I found a rare vintage Omega watch at an auction. He had always been fascinated by timepieces, though he owned only a few modest ones. This particular watch was from the 1960s, the era he always reminisced about as the Golden Age. It cost me $5,000, but I knew it was something truly special, something he couldn't simply dismiss. For Noah and his family, I arranged an all-expenses-paid 2-week trip to Italy. Noah had always talked about wanting to take his wife Julia and their children to Europe, but with 3 kids and his demanding job, they had never prioritized it. The package included luxury accommodations, private tours, and even a personal photographer for family portraits in front of the Colosseum. This gift cost nearly $20,000. For Ethan, who had recently mentioned wanting to expand his architecture firm but lacked capital, I prepared a check for $50,000 as seed money. I also commissioned a renowned artist to create a scale model of his first major building design, something I knew would touch him personally. As I wrapped each gift, I couldn't help wondering if they would finally see me differently. Would these tangible displays of my success and thoughtfulness finally earn their respect? Or at least their acknowledgement? The week before Christmas, I boarded a first-class flight from San Francisco to Boston. As the plane took off, anxiety and anticipation fought for dominance in my mind. Part of me was excited at the possibility of reconciliation, while another part remained guarded, remembering countless disappointments. During the 6-hour flight, I rehearsed conversations in my head, imagining different scenarios of how my family might react to seeing me after so long. Would they be warm and welcoming, or would they treat me with the same dismissive attitude I remembered? I ordered a glass of champagne to calm my nerves, then another, trying to quiet the doubts swirling in my mind. When we landed, I collected my luggage and headed to the rental car counter. I had reserved a black Tesla Model 01, knowing it would make an impression when I pulled into my parents' driveway. It was an indulgence, but I wanted that moment of recognition when they saw me step out of a luxury vehicle I had paid for myself. The drive from Logan Airport to my childhood home in Wellesley took about 40 minutes. As familiar landmarks appeared, memories flooded back, both good and bad. The ice cream shop where my father would occasionally take us on summer evenings, the park where my mother would read while ignoring my attempts to show her the structures I built in the sandbox, the high school where I spent 4 years feeling invisible despite being at the top of my class. When I finally turned onto my parents' street, I felt my heart rate accelerate. Their house looked exactly as I remembered, a colonial-style home with perfect landscaping and tasteful Christmas decorations. No gaudy inflatable Santas or flashing lights for the Caldwell family, only elegant wreaths and subtle white lights that signaled refined taste to anyone passing by. I parked behind Noah's Range Rover and Ethan's BMW, taking a moment to collect myself before gathering the carefully wrapped presents from the trunk. The weight of the gifts in my arms felt like armor as I walked up the stone path to the front door. Standing there, I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell, the same chime I had heard thousands of times growing up. As I waited for someone to answer, I straightened my posture and put on a confident smile. Whatever happened inside this house, I was no longer the overlooked little girl desperate for approval. I was Amelia Caldwell, a successful businesswoman who had built something meaningful on her own terms. The door swung open, and for the first time in 5 years, I stood face to face with my past. The door opened to reveal my mother, Margaret, looking exactly as I remembered. Perfectly coiffed blonde hair, impeccable makeup, and a designer outfit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. For a split second, her eyes widened in what looked like genuine surprise, as if she hadn't truly expected me to come. "Amelia," she said, her voice carrying that familiar, controlled tone. "You're here." No warm embrace, no exclamation of joy, just a polite acknowledgement. She stepped aside to let me in, her gaze dropping to the pile of gifts in my arms. "My, you've brought quite a lot." "It's Christmas," I replied, trying to keep my voice light. "And it's been a while." As I stepped into the foyer, the house smelled exactly as it always had during the holidays: cinnamon, pine, and the faint scent of my mother's expensive perfume. The familiarity was both comforting and unsettling. My father appeared from his study, looking older than I remembered. His hair had more gray, and the lines around his eyes had deepened. He approached with a hesitant smile, clearly uncomfortable. "Amelia," he said, awkwardly patting my shoulder. "Good to see you. The drive from the airport okay?" "It was fine, Dad. I rented a car." I gestured toward the Tesla outside. "It looks expensive," he commented, though I couldn't tell if he was impressed or disapproving. Before I could respond, the sound of children's laughter echoed from the living room, and moments later, Noah appeared with his family. His wife, Julia, gave me a polite smile, while their three children, Madison, 8, Thomas, 6, and Emma, 4, stared at me with curiosity. "Aunt Amelia!" Madison exclaimed, clearly having been prepped for my arrival. "Daddy showed us your picture." Noah stepped forward, giving me a brief one-armed hug. "Hey, little sis, you look good. Silicon Valley must be treating you well." There was an undercurrent to his words, something between surprise and assessment, as though he was mentally calculating my success based on my appearance. "It's San Francisco, actually, and yes, things are going well." Julia approached, her designer outfit and perfectly highlighted hair, making it clear she had embraced the Caldwell family aesthetic. "Amelia, it's so nice to finally meet you. Noah talks about you sometimes." The emphasis on sometimes wasn't lost on me. Little Emma, the youngest, tugged at my coat. "Are you really my aunt? I never saw you before." Her innocent comment stung more than any cold greeting from my parents. I knelt to her level. "Yes, I am. And I'm sorry I haven't been around, but I'm here now. Would you like to help me put these presents under the tree?" Emma nodded enthusiastically, her face lighting up at the mention of presents. As we moved toward the living room, Ethan emerged from the kitchen with a glass of wine, his face breaking into what seemed like a genuine smile. "Amelia," he exclaimed, approaching for a real hug. "It's about time you came home." Of all my family members, Ethan had always been the most supportive, though our contact had also dwindled over the years. "It's good to see you, Ethan," I said, meaning it. He helped me with some of the presents, whispering, "Fair warning, Mom's been on edge planning everything. Dad's firm lost a big client last month, and Noah's been insufferable about his latest promotion." I appreciated the insider information, though it did little to ease the tension I felt. The pre-Christmas dinner that evening was an exercise in strained politeness. We sat around the dining table that had witnessed countless family meals, the fine china and crystal glasses reflecting the warm light from the chandelier above. My mother had prepared her famous roast beef with all the trimmings, a meal that had always signified special occasions in our household. Throughout the dinner, the conversation flowed around me rather than including me. My mother dominated the discussion, focusing on Noah's recent promotion to partner at his law firm. "The youngest partner in the firm's history," she boasted, refilling her wine glass. "We always knew you were destined for greatness." Julia chimed in with stories about the children's accomplishments: Madison's piano recital, Thomas's soccer trophies, the advanced reading program Emma had been placed in. When Ethan mentioned his firm's new project, designing a community center, my father finally perked up. "That's excellent, son. Visibility on projects like that can really elevate your firm's profile." I waited for a natural opening to share something about my own life. When there was finally a lull in the conversation, I spoke up. "I've had some exciting developments with my company too. We're launching a new platform next quarter that's already attracting a lot of attention in the industry. My mother nodded distractedly. That's nice, dear. Oh, Julia, did you tell Amelia about the charity gala you chaired last month? It was written up in Boston Magazine. And just like that, the conversation shifted away from me again. I caught Ethan giving me an apologetic look across the table, but he didn't intervene. As dessert was served, my father briefly asked, "So, this company of yours, is it making any money yet? Tech startups are risky business." Before I could answer with the truth that we had secured major funding and were projecting 8-figure revenues for the coming year, my mother interrupted. "Richard, business talk is hardly appropriate for Christmas Eve. Let's keep things festive." She turned to Noah's wife. "Julia, would you help me bring in coffee?" Throughout the evening, I noticed that little Emma kept watching me with curious eyes. When the adults moved to the living room after dinner, she sidled up next to me on the sofa. "Aunt Amelia, what do you do? Do you make things?" Emma asked, her curiosity sincere. I smiled at her interest. "Yes, in a way. I make computer programs that help people communicate better." "Like texting?" she asked, eyes wide. "Something like that, but for businesses," I explained. She nodded seriously. "That sounds important. Daddy is always talking about communication problems at his work." I couldn't help but laugh. Your daddy is right about that. Communication is very important. For those few minutes with Emma, I felt more valued than I had all evening with the adults in my family. When the night finally wound down and everyone headed to bed, I retreated to my old bedroom, now converted into a guest room with barely a trace of my childhood left. Sitting on the unfamiliar bed in my familiar room, I felt a complex mix of disappointment and determination. The day had not gone the way I hoped, but Christmas was still tomorrow. Maybe the magic of Christmas morning and my carefully chosen gifts would finally break through the walls between us. Christmas morning dawned bright and clear, sunlight bouncing off the fresh snow from the night before. For a moment, lying in bed and hearing distant children's voices, I felt a wave of childhood nostalgia. Then reality returned, where I was and the emotional distance that separated me from my family despite the physical closeness. I got up early, determined to make one more effort to connect. In the kitchen, I started preparing a special breakfast, one of the few family traditions that had survived my mother's attempts to delegate it to the housekeeper in later years. French toast with caramelized apples, maple bacon, and my father's favorite freshly squeezed orange juice. The familiar rhythm of cooking soothed me, and I hoped the gesture would matter. By 7:30, everyone drifted into the kitchen, drawn by the aroma. Noah's kids bounced around excitedly in matching Christmas pajamas. "Aunt Amelia made breakfast," Emma announced proudly, as if she had helped plan it. My mother surveyed the spread with a tight smile. "How quaint. I had planned to serve the croissants from Lavelle's bakery, but this is fine too." "This looks great, Amelia," Ethan said, already filling his plate. My father nodded in agreement, though he barely looked up from his phone, likely checking emails despite the holiday. Noah and Julia murmured their thanks while serving the children. Madison took one bite of the French toast and declared, "Grandma's is better," earning my mother's pleased smile. "Well, I haven't made this in years," I replied lightly, trying not to feel the sting. "It's yummy," Emma whispered conspiratorially, and once again I felt grateful for her unfiltered kindness. After breakfast, everyone gathered in the living room around the 12-foot Christmas tree, dominating the space. Presents covered the floor, wrapped in coordinated paper, reflecting my mother's obsession with aesthetics. My gifts, wrapped in paper I brought from San Francisco, stood out slightly from the curated display. "Time for presents," my mother announced, clapping her hands. As always, she acted as the official gift distributor. Children first, of course. Noah's kids tore into their presents, squealing with delight. My parents had given them everything from the latest gadgets to expensive clothes. The pile of open gifts grew quickly. "And these special ones are from Aunt Amelia," my mother said, handing them my packages. Madison opened her custom art set with a polite thank you, though her eyes had already drifted to the next gift. Thomas was more excited about the coding robot I chose to nurture his interest in science. But Emma reacted with genuine joy at the interactive globe, immediately asking me to show her where I lived in California. Then it was the adults' turn. My father received ties, golf accessories, and books from my mother and brothers. When he opened my gift, the vintage Omega, his eyebrows lifted in surprise. "This is quite something," he said, examining it closely. "Must have cost a penny. It's from the 60s, the era you always talk about." He nodded, looking at me with what felt like new consideration. "Thank you, Amelia. It's very thoughtful." My mother received silk scarves, perfume, and a spa package from the others. When she opened my gift, the Tiffany bracelet, she gasped softly. "My goodness," she said, lifting it. "This is certainly extravagant." "You once mentioned wanting one like it," I reminded her. A flicker of something crossed her face. Recognition, or perhaps discomfort, at being known so well by the daughter she kept at a distance. "It's lovely, thank you," she said, placing it back in the box instead of wearing it. Ethan was genuinely moved by both the check and the model of his building. "Amelia, this is incredible," he said, studying the details and the investment. "We need to talk about this. It's too much." "It's not," I assured him. "I believe in what you're doing." Noah and Julia were speechless when they opened the Italy trip details. We couldn't possibly accept this," Julia stammered, though her eyes betrayed her excitement. "Consider it making up for missed birthdays and Christmases," I said with a smile. "And I'd love to see pictures of the kids experiencing Rome." As the gift opening continued, I noticed something unsettling. Everyone had opened multiple presents, including mine, but nothing had been handed to me. The pile under the tree shrank until only a few small packages remained. None for me. A quiet, heavy awkwardness settled over the room as it became obvious I was the only one without gifts. Heat rose in my cheeks, but I kept my composure, refusing to show how deeply the exclusion hurt. Emma, with a child's innocent honesty, broke the silence. "Where are Amelia's presents?" My mother let out a sharp, uncomfortable laugh. "Oh, we forgot you," she said, as though forgetting her own daughter on Christmas morning was a minor mistake. My father shifted in his chair, uneasy. "Well, we weren't sure you were coming until recently." Noah avoided my gaze completely, suddenly focused on helping Thomas with his new toy. Julia gave me a look that might have been meant as sympathetic, but it came across as pity. Ethan was the only one who seemed genuinely upset. "This is ridiculous. I have something for you, Amelia. It's just not wrapped yet." But his rushed reassurance only highlighted the truth. No one had thought to get me anything. After 5 years away, returning with thousands of dollars worth of thoughtful gifts, I was still an afterthought in my own family. The room grew tense, everyone waiting for my reaction. I saw it in their eyes. They expected tears or perhaps an angry outburst. My mother's slight smirk suggested she might even have been hoping for a scene. Some confirmation that I was still the emotional, overlooked little sister desperate for attention. In that moment, looking at their expectant faces, something solidified inside me. This wasn't an oversight. This was intentional. And suddenly, I knew exactly how to respond. The silence was deafening as everyone waited. I felt the weight of their stares, some concerned, others almost eager to witness my breakdown. This moment would define not only this Christmas, but possibly our family dynamic moving forward. I took a slow breath and did the very last thing they expected. I smiled. "It's okay," I said calmly. "Look what I got myself." With deliberate movements, I picked up my phone and opened my photo gallery. Confusion washed across their faces, everyone frozen, waiting for what would come next. "I've been meaning to share some news with you all," I continued, my voice steady. Since none of you have really asked about my life these past few years, I thought now would be a good time for an update. I handed my phone to my father first, showing him photos of my tech company's headquarters in San Francisco, a sleek, modern building with my company's logo displayed boldly across the front. This is my company, Adaptive Tech. We created a revolutionary AI communication platform now used by over half of the Fortune 500. I swiped to the next photo, showing me shaking hands with some of the most recognizable CEOs in the tech world. These are some of our clients. My father's expression shifted from confusion to stunned disbelief. He passed the phone to my mother, who squinted at the images with growing recognition. 3 months ago, I continued, as the phone made its way around the room, we finalized an acquisition deal. A major tech conglomerate purchased Adaptive Tech for $820 million. The sharp breath Noah sucked in was deeply satisfying. Julia's jaw literally dropped. Of course, as founder and majority shareholder, a significant portion of that came to me. I said, speaking matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. After taxes and distributing shares to my employees, I walked away with just over $300 million. $300 million? My father repeated, his voice barely a whisper. Yes, I confirmed. But the money isn't what I'm most proud of. I took my phone back and swiped to another set of images, a modern building with Caldwell Foundation on its entrance. This is the philanthropic organization I established last month. We focus on providing tech, education, and entrepreneurial support to young women from underprivileged backgrounds. I looked directly at my mother as I added, girls who, like me, might have potential that others fail to recognize. The comment struck exactly where I aimed. My mother's face flushed, though she said nothing. The foundation has already awarded 60 full college scholarships and funded 15 women-led startups. We're just getting started, but Forbes has already recognized us as one of the most promising new philanthropic ventures in the country. I swiped to reveal the magazine cover, me, with the headline, Tech's New Philanthropic Powerhouse. In fact, I continued, enjoying the stunned silence, that's where I'll be headed after Christmas. I'm receiving an award in New York, then flying to London to open our first international office. Little Emma, who had been listening with intense concentration, piped up. You're in a magazine? Are you famous, Aunt Amelia? I smiled at her. Not exactly famous, sweetheart. Just doing work that matters. Ethan was the first to recover. Amelia, this is incredible. Why didn't you tell us? I met his eyes evenly. When exactly was I supposed to tell you? During the 5 Christmases I wasn't invited to? Or yesterday at dinner when everyone was too busy talking about Noah's promotion to ask me a single question about my life? Noah at least had the decency to look embarrassed. We had no idea. No, you didn't. I agreed. Because none of you ever asked. I turned the screen toward them again, this time showing photos of my home, a stunning modern house overlooking the Pacific Ocean. This is where I live now. 6 bedrooms, an infinity pool, and an art collection featured in Architectural Digest last spring. I swiped to reveal my garage, showcasing 3 luxury vehicles. And these are what I drive depending on my mood. The Tesla outside is just my rental for this trip. My father stared at the images, astonishment mixed with something that looked surprisingly like regret. My mother, however, tried to recover her footing. Well, she said, with forced lightness, it seems you've done very well for yourself, though I do hope all this money and attention hasn't made you forget the importance of family and settling down. Success isn't everything, after all. It was classic Margaret Caldwell, reframing my achievements as incomplete because they didn't match her narrow definition of a woman's priorities. 5 years ago, I might have been hurt by this. Today, I simply found it amusing. Actually, Mother, I haven't forgotten about family at all. In fact, I've created one of my own, a team of brilliant, supportive people who value each other's contributions and celebrate each other's success. As for settling down, I'm quite settled. My life is exactly what I want it to be. I paused, meeting each of their eyes one by one. And as for success not being everything, I completely agree. Integrity, kindness, and recognizing the worth of others are just as important. Values I had to learn largely on my own. The comment fell heavy and unmistakable. My mother's smile froze. My father looked down at his hands. Noah suddenly found Thomas's new toy fascinating. I don't share all this to boast, I continued, gently. I share it because for years I felt invisible in this family. I kept hoping that if I achieved enough, you might finally see me. Eventually, I realized I needed to see myself first, to recognize my own worth instead of waiting for your approval. Emma, with the child's perfect timing, broke the tension by climbing onto my lap. I like your house with the swimming pool. Can we visit you? I hugged her. Of course you can, sweetheart. I'd love that. My revelation had left the room in various states of shock. My father looked as if he'd been struck, still processing everything. My mother was torn between pride in having raised a successful daughter and dismay at seeing her carefully crafted hierarchy collapse. Noah seemed caught between jealousy and new respect, while Julia was already calculating the social advantages of having a rich sister-in-law. Only Ethan appeared genuinely happy for me, raising his coffee mug in a small toast. To Amelia, the most successful Caldwell of us all. That simple acknowledgement, after years of being overlooked, felt better than I ever imagined. The hours that followed were filled with emotional undercurrents. The family split into small groups, each processing the news on their own. My father retreated to his study, my mother busied herself in the kitchen, and Noah took his children outside to play in the snow. Ethan and I sat in the den, catching up properly for the first time in years. After about an hour, there was a soft knock on the den door. My father stood there looking uncharacteristically hesitant. Amelia? Could we talk in my study? I followed him to the wood-paneled room that had always been his sanctuary. As a child, being summoned there meant I was in trouble. Today, the dynamic was different. He closed the door and motioned me to sit in one of the leathered chairs, facing his desk. But instead of taking his usual seat behind it, he sat beside me. I owe you an apology, he began, his voice rough. Several, actually. I stayed quiet, giving him space. I've been thinking about what you said, about never being seen. You're right. Your mother and I, especially, failed you. He rubbed a hand across his face. There's no excuse, but there is an explanation, if you're willing to hear it. I nodded, surprised by his vulnerability. Your mother and I had certain expectations for our children. For the boys, it was simple: success in conventional fields, financial security, solid marriages. But for you, he sighed deeply. Your mother had very specific ideas about the kind of life you should lead. When you showed interest in technology and business, fields she considered traditionally male, she worried. She pushed me to redirect you toward more appropriate pursuits. And you went along with it, I said, not accusing, just stating the truth. I did, she admitted. It was easier than fighting her, and I told myself it was for your own good. I was wrong. He looked straight at me. I see that clearly now. You had a vision for your life that we didn't understand, but that didn't give us the right to dismiss it. His honesty startled me. My father had never been one to admit fault. When you left after college, your mother was convinced you'd struggle and come home. When you didn't, when we heard whispers of your success from distant connections, she grew defensive, as if your independence were a rejection of her values. I should have reached out. I should have stood up to her. That's on me. A complex mix of emotions rose in me: vindication, hurt, and something softer. Thank you for telling me, I said quietly. It helps me make sense of things I've wondered about for years. He nodded, relieved. Your success is extraordinary, Amelia. I am proud of you, not just for what you've accomplished, but for doing it on your own terms, despite our lack of support. He hesitated. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope we can build something new going forward. It was the beginning of something unfamiliar. Honesty. Later that afternoon, I found myself alone in the kitchen with my mother as she aggressively rolled out pie dough. "So," she said without looking up, "you've done quite well for yourself." "Yes," I replied simply. "I have." She kept rolling, pressing harder than necessary. "I suppose you think we're terrible parents for not recognizing your potential." "I'm curious," I said, ignoring her defensive tone. "Were you surprised by my success, or surprised that I achieved it without your approval?" Her hand stilled on the rolling pin. For a moment, I thought she might snap, but instead her shoulders sagged slightly. "Both, perhaps." She finally looked at me. "You were always different, Amelia. Stubborn. Independent. You reminded me of myself before I chose this life." That stopped me cold. "What do you mean?" She sighed and brushed the flour from her hands. "I had ambitions too, you know. I was accepted into medical school." I stared at her stunned. "My parents were furious, said it wasn't feminine, said no man would want a wife smarter than himself." A bitter smile touched her lips. "So I gave it up, met my father, became the perfect corporate wife and mother." She paused. "When I saw that same fire in you, I thought I was protecting you from disappointment." "By discouraging me at every turn?" I said, unable to hide the edge in my voice. "By steering you toward a life with guarantees," she insisted. "What you were chasing seemed so risky. And yes," she added reluctantly, "maybe I was envious of your courage to pursue what I abandoned." Her honesty, late as it was, disarmed me. I had never seen her as anything but formidable and judgmental. Seeing the regrets beneath her armor added a dimension I hadn't expected. "We can't change the past, but we can try for something better forwarding." She nodded, a fragile truce forming between us. My conversation with Noah was more straightforward. He caught me alone before dinner, looking uncharacteristically humbled. "I've been a terrible brother," he said without hesitation. "I took for granted that I was the golden child, never questioning why you were treated differently. I should have stood up for you." "Yes, you should have," I replied. "But we were all playing the roles assigned to us. You followed the path laid out for you, while you carved your own," he said, with a trace of admiration. "I've spent my whole life trying to please Mom and Dad. You had the courage to disappoint them, and look where that got you." I smiled softly. "It's never too late to make changes, Noah." Later, I found Ethan sitting on the back porch, watching the sunset. He handed me a small, hastily wrapped package. "I really did get you something. It's not much, but..." Inside was a framed photo of us from high school, taken after I'd won a science competition. Ethan had his arm around me, both of us grinning. "You were the only one who came to that competition," I said quietly. He nodded. "I was always proud of you, Amelia. I just wasn't brave enough to go against the family current." He met my eyes. "I want to be a better brother from now on." The most touching moment came from little Emma, who approached me with a crayon drawing. "I made you a present, Aunt Amelia," she said seriously. "It's you and me at your swimming pool." I knelt and hugged her. "This is the best gift I've received in years." She looked up at me with innocent certainty. "Grandma was wrong to forget you. I won't ever forget you." Out of the mouths of babes, as they say. That evening, I gathered everyone in the living room for an announcement. "I have one more surprise," I said. "I recently made an investment that means a great deal to me." I handed my father an envelope. Inside were the deed and keys to our childhood home. "You bought our house?" my mother gasped. "Not exactly. I established a trust that will maintain ownership of this property for our family in perpetuity. No matter what financial challenges may come, this home will remain in the Caldwell family." My father looked at the papers in disbelief. "Amelia, this is extraordinary. But why?" "Because, despite everything, this is where our family story began. I want to preserve that history while giving us the chance to write better chapters going forward. I looked around at their faces. I have one condition, though, that we treat each other with respect and genuine care, that we see and value each person for who they truly are, not for who we want them to be. One by one, they nodded in agreement. The remainder of Christmas Day unfolded differently than any Caldwell family gathering I could remember. There was an authenticity to our interactions that had been missing for decades, perhaps even generations. The walls of pretense and performance had begun to crumble, revealing glimpses of the people my family members truly were beneath their carefully constructed facades. Dinner that evening was a more relaxed affair. My mother allowed me to help in the kitchen without criticizing my technique. My father asked genuine questions about my company and foundation, listening intently to my answers. Noah's children warmed up to me, especially after I promised to help Madison set up a simple website for her school project. As we gathered around the table, I noticed small gestures that would have been unthinkable just hours earlier. My mother wore the bracelet I had given her. My father used his phone to research the history of his vintage watch, sharing interesting facts about it with genuine enthusiasm. Ethan and Noah engaged me in conversation about potential collaboration opportunities, their interests sincere rather than opportunistic. After the children were put to bed, my parents somewhat sheepishly presented me with hastily wrapped gifts: a silk scarf my mother had originally bought for herself, and a first-edition book from my father's collection. The presents themselves were less significant than the gesture, the acknowledgement of their oversight and attempt to rectify it. The most meaningful gift, however, came later that evening when my mother handed me a sealed envelope. "I wrote this while you were talking with your father," she explained, uncharacteristic uncertainty in her voice. I thought it might be easier to express some things in writing. In privacy, I read her letter, a heartfelt apology acknowledging years of dismissal and unfair treatment. She wrote about her own abandoned dreams and how she had projected her fears onto me. The letter ended with a request, not for forgiveness, which she felt she hadn't earned, but for the opportunity to build a different kind of relationship moving forward. That night, lying in my childhood bed, I reflected on the day's events. The hurt and neglect I had experienced were real, and no single day of reckoning could erase those wounds. Yet something had shifted. The truth had been spoken aloud, acknowledged rather than denied. It wasn't a Hollywood ending with all issues magically resolved. It was a beginning, one built on honesty rather than pretense. In the days that followed, before I returned to San Francisco, we began establishing new patterns of interaction. I spent time teaching Emma how to use the interactive globe, showing her the places I had traveled for business. I had coffee with Ethan, discussing his architectural vision and how my foundation might support some of his community-focused projects. Even Noah made efforts, awkwardly but sincerely, to connect without competition or judgment. My parents, too, were different, more present, more willing to listen than to direct. My father asked for my input on some investment decisions, valuing my business acumen. My mother shared stories about her early ambitions, revealing a woman I had never known existed. As the time for my departure approached, I made a decision. "I'd like to invite all of you to San Francisco this summer," I announced at our final dinner together. "We could spend time at my home, and I could show you the foundation's work." The enthusiastic response surprised me. Plans were made, dates tentatively set. There was an eagerness for connection that I hadn't anticipated. On my last morning, as my father helped load my luggage into the rental car, he paused. "You know, Amelia, I've been thinking about what real success means. For years, I measured it in promotions and portfolio values. But watching what you've built, not just your company, but the way you've maintained your integrity and compassion through it all, it's made me reconsider many things." His words touched me deeply. "It's taken me time to understand that too," I admitted. "For years, I drove myself to succeed, partly to prove my worth to this family. Eventually, I realized that true success isn't about external validation. It's about being aligned with your own values and using your gifts in ways that matter. He nodded thoughtfully. You've taught all of us something important, though we were supposed to be the ones teaching you. As I drove away from my childhood home, I felt lighter than I had in years. The journey of healing had only just begun, but the hardest step, acknowledging the truth, had been taken. The empire I had built professionally had brought me financial security and recognition, but I was now beginning to build something potentially more valuable, an empire of authentic relationships, not ones based on performance and conditional approval, but on genuine acceptance and respect for each person's unique path. I had gone from being the forgotten daughter to the successful entrepreneur, but neither identity fully defined me. I was Amelia, a woman who had learned through difficulty that her worth wasn't dependent on others' recognition, who had found the strength to stand in her truth while still extending the possibility of reconciliation. The greatest gift I received that Christmas wasn't wrapped in paper or acknowledged with fanfare. It was the realization that I no longer needed my family's approval to feel complete. Yet I could still open my heart to the possibility of a renewed connection on healthier terms. Perhaps that's the most valuable empire anyone can build. Not one of wealth or achievement, but of self-knowledge, boundaries, and the courage to offer second chances without compromising one's dignity. So, I ask you, have you ever had to stand in your truth when others couldn't see your value? What empire are you building in your own life? Share your stories in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that their worth isn't determined by others' recognition. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, your value isn't diminished by someone else's inability to see it.